This is so you have routine, which is basically, if you want, a concept that can be linked to a Penrose idea of competence and capabilities. The second pillar is that these routines are not given, and here is the link with dynamic capabilities, are not given, by they change over time, following what, according to Nelson and Winters, following what they call a process of search. So as long as your profitability is satisfying, meaning you don't maximize profit, okay? You want to have a profit, and you have a level of profit that, according to you, is satisfying. So it's fine with you, okay? As long as your profit is satisfying or satisficing, as they call it, firms, they stick to their routine, to the way in which they organize activities. If profitability falls below this level, then firms are driven to consider alternative routines. So again, take the example of the smart working practices. Okay, adopting or not adopting smart working practices is a routine. Okay, is a way of organizing your activities that depend on formal and informal rules. As long as you were living in the pre-COVID world, to organize your activity without using smart working was satisfying for you, because it allowed you to obtain a sufficient level of profit. Then you have the COVID shock, which dramatically, as you will see later on in the second part of the class, reduces profit of the firms. And what you have to do, well, firms, after the shock, start to search for new routines, for new practices, and in particular, one of them is they start to search for the possibility of organizing their production activities using at least some degree of smart working. Those who manage to do this, they can restore a little bit of their profitability, of course, not as much as before, but they can still rise a little bit their profit. Those who cannot will, of course, suffer big losses from the economic point of view. Okay, this is something that can be very well studied and interpreted using the lenses of the evolutionary approach. The third pillar of this routine is, as I was saying before, the idea of selection. Okay, so basically, according to Nelson and Winter, routines are the factors that define competitive advantage, because it defines the capability of the firm to be less or more competitive. And routines are therefore the way in which selection, are therefore the main components on the basis of which selection takes place in the market. In particular, market environments provide a definition of success of business firm, and that definition is very closely related to their ability to survive and grow. So again, with the example of the COVID, the idea is that organizing your work using at least some degree of smart working is a routine. If you adopt this routine, you increase your profit. If you fail to adopt this routine, you fail to restore your profit. We can expect, and this is one prediction that you can make on the basis of the evolutionary approach, in 1 year time, okay, March next year, if we look at companies, we might expect that we will observe a much larger set of firms that will have start using smart working in organizing their production activities. Why? Well, because in this new context, smart working becomes a successful routine, because it allows company to deal with the changed environmental condition. Because again, for instance, as it is likely that it will happen, in the next year you will still have to deal and to ensure that you can keep some degree of social distancing among people and things like that. Okay? Or just, for instance, because schools will not open in September, and therefore you need some of your worker to be able to deal both with your with their work, but also with taking care of their children at home. Okay, so for all these reasons, we might expect that firms that will be more successful in the next year are the ones that can adopt some degree of smart working, and this routine, therefore, is one of the main factors that will define the selection taking place among firms. Those who will fail in doing this will exit. Those who manage to do this will survive. So in 1 year time, the share of firms adopting smart working practices, which is actually a routine, will be much larger than we were observing before the COVID shock. Okay, so this is one example of how selection takes place across firm, and in particular is driven by heterogeneity of routines. Okay, so as I was saying, this theory is basically as direct link with the biological idea of evolution that was developed by Darwin. But okay, I'm not going to detail of this. But okay, the idea is that in Darwin, to define how selection takes place across species, you need three components. You need variation, meaning you need species to be different. You need inheritance that takes place via genes. So the offsprings of a species will inherit the genes of the ancestor, if you want. And in this way, you can ensure that genes are passed from one generation to the other. And then you need selection, meaning you need to have an environment in which some species will survive and some species will die. In in Nielsen and Winter approach, all these three aspects are present because variation is given by organizational routine. So firms are different because they use different organizational routine. Inheritance is ensured by the fact that it's not very easy to change routines. So routines tend to be sticky over time. So firms tend to stick to their routine for some period. Of course, this is important because if every day you change your routine, then selection will never happen or will take lot of time to take place. And finally, you have selection that operates through market competition. So this is the analogy between these three components and the three components in Darwin's theory explain why Nelson and Winter approach is labeled as evolutionary approach to the theory of the firm. Once again, it is important to underline that when we talk about evolutionary approach in economics as well as in biology, differently from what sometimes is thought by people, we are not saying anything that deals with selection of the best people, best firm or best species. Okay, there is nothing neither in Darwin works nor in Nelson and Winter works that suggests this. Okay, so evolutionary theory is not about selection of the best people or the best anything. Is about the selection of the fittest, and the fittest is not necessarily the best one or the most efficient or the nicest type of society. Okay, it's nothing related to that. It's much more complex the way in which the argument is made. Okay. Okay. So what? Okay. So why it is interesting? Or say again, why is interesting this theory, and what is another factor that sort of like differentiate this theory with respect to the standard approach? Well, one interesting aspect is that in this firm, this approach pays much more attention to the process of learning and development within an organization. So, in a certain sense, the way in which you look at firm is different with respect to the standard neoclassical approach because you think of firm as a much more dynamic agent. So they are proactive agents. They are agents that they do things. They do not only in a passive way take prices and factors of production, optimize the production function, and produce, but they learn how to do new things, they define strategies, they interact with their surrounding environment, and also they accumulate knowledge, which is an important aspect that is completely neglected in the standard approach. Very brief comparison between Nelson and Winter and Penrose. There are commonalities. In both cases, there is an emphasis on learning and teamwork, meaning they see firm more as a social unit rather than just as a production function. And there is also an emphasis on change and dynamic elements. I've said already many things about that. There are some differences, and in particular, one important difference is the idea of selection that is very important in the Nelson Winter approach rather than in Penrose. That's it for the evolutionary and resource-based. Now, in the next 20 minutes, and then we, as I was saying, we stop for a small break. What I want to do is to apply this approach to multinational companies. Okay, so how can we use this approach to study the theory of transnational companies? Now, of course, neither Penrose approach nor Nelson and Winter approach are theories of transnational companies. They are theories of the firm, okay, in general. However, likewise, it happened with transaction cost economics. These approaches have been influential. Sorry, just the quality of the wireless went down, so I just stopped for 1 second. Okay, now it should be okay. So I was saying, neither Penrose approach nor Winter's approach are theories of the multinational company. Both of them are theories of the firm. However, these approaches have been influential. Again, the network is down. 1 second. Don't know why the network goes up and down so frequently. I think you don't hear me well now, so let me just, okay, now it should be fine. Okay, so I was saying, neither Penrose approach nor Winter's approach are theories about about multinational companies. They are theories of the firm. However, they both have been used in order to develop theories of transnational company. In particular, there are two of such theories that are important. One is Cantwell, and the second one is Kogut and Zander. In our lecture today, we will consider only Cantwell theory. In the book, you should also have a reference to Kogut and Zander, and I leave it to you to study because it's basically an extension of Cantwell approach.